Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the debut of the OneSoccer Roundtable. We are so glad you decided to spend some of your evening with us. We've assembled a pretty formidable cast of characters, including two guys on loan from the Canadian Premier League itself. That's right, it is the COC, Charlie O'Connor-Clark. Of course, our friend Kristian Jack, and that guy wearing a Club America top for some reason. Of course, that is Oliver Platt. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you. Great to see you. And I'm going to begin with a little trick that I learned from my good friend KJ, how he sometimes starts the CPL Newsroom podcast and ask you a question to break the ice a little bit here. So, gentlemen, with the weather that we're having, really cold, lots of snow, some ice here in Ontario. If you could pick any warm weather destination to holiday after the window, of course, where would you go and why? And I'd like to begin with the man making his OneSoccer debut, Charlie O'Connor-Clark.
Oh man, I can go anywhere in the world
Anywhere
after
in the world.
the international window. I've always been a big kind of Mediterranean holiday guy, thinking like Greece or something. I'm not big on kind of the Caribbean beaches and things like that. So I think when you got a little culture, you got a little sunshine. I think that's what I'm going for.
Like that a lot. KJ, what about you?
Anywhere warm right now is just fine with me. You can have beaches, palm trees. I don't care. A little bit of spring training baseball if they ever start playing. I don't want to talk about Cooperstown, so let's forget about that choice today. But yeah, Arizona, maybe some spring training ball. That'd be nice.
Like that. Scottsdale's a great shout. Ollie?
Despite it being very accessible to me for most of my life, I never have been to Italy, and I eat a lot of pasta, so I would think that would be top of my list for food and weather reasons.
Oliver Platt eating a lot of pasta. That is the clip we're going to be.
He's going to be buying a lot of soccer shirts, 40 shirts there too. I can imagine.
My first ever non-English shirt actually was Fiorentina, so I could get an update of that maybe while
it's a good one.
Yeah.
Nice. I love the purple. You know that, so I appreciate the shout. Listen, gentlemen, we have a ton of topics to get to. Obviously, we're going to focus a ton on the Canadian men's national team and the upcoming massive window they have in World Cup qualifier, some squad announcements. We'll have the guys put their pundit caps on, their coaching caps on. We'll get a little bit of everything. But of course, we want this to be interactive as always. So please get your questions in on Twitter at OneSoccer, as well as in the YouTube live chat. And our producers behind the scenes, of course, the wonderful Marty Thompson and Armin Badakian will feed those through as the show progresses. But I want to begin with a very simple question. It's one that a lot of supporters have been asking themselves, and that is, of the two names that we know will be missing, at least for what we suspect is the first match, that is Stefan Stacchio. And congratulations, by the way, to Stefan on his move to Porto. That's great to see it finally transpire. And Alphonso Davies, who, of course, is still dealing with the effects of myocarditis post-COVID-19 infection. Which do you think is the bigger loss between those two players? And I'll begin with you, Kristian.
Well, I think it's Davies. I mean, Stacchio's been the best player, but I don't think it can be any other player, right? I think it's Alphonso Davies, just for a lot of reasons. I think obviously, I think he would say that he's probably not played his best during these World Cup qualifiers. We haven't seen the best out of him. He's obviously playing a bit more of an unfamiliar position than he plays at club level, and he is the targeted man from opponents, right? But I just think, when I watch him play and how much he's connected with this country, there's so many different, elements to not just playing on the pitch. And I think, it's clear from what John Herman has spoke about that he's missed in the dressing room, and obviously he's got that wonderful, charismatic personality. But I think on the pitch, you're certainly going to miss that X factor. It is a little bit easier to defend against them, Canada, and think about them without him on the pitch. They still have great players we're going to get to. And Ollie and I sat on that couch a number of times and waxed lyrical about Stacchio, and I love him too. But for me, it's got to be Alphonso Davies.
Ollie, locker room, changing room, or dressing room? What's it called? Is it called locker room, dressing room, or changing room?
I think I would have it as a changing dressing room or changing room. Locker room is definitely the kind of more North American version, I would say.
Just a tangent, but please continue.
It's Davies, I agree. And you could also look at the fact that they've only scored 2 goals in 3 away games so far, right? And he's created both of them. So I think there's definitely the potential for that to get better, given they've played, in my opinion, their 3 toughest road games. And these opponents may not be quite as strong. And I think there's more to come from Buchanan and Davids and players like that as well. But, those are the facts right now. And they're going to miss Davies for those reasons. But I would say that because of all that talent I've just mentioned, I have a bit more confidence that there is the potential in the team for it to still be very dynamic in an attacking sense without Davies. Whereas I think in central midfield without Stacchio, don't get me wrong, Atiba's obviously a legend, Kay's a great player, but 3 games over 7 days, I think it's going to be a bit more about holding that group together rather than really expecting, massive fireworks out of them. So you can make an argument either way, but I'll go with a safe option on Davies as well, I think.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, I mean, I think that is the key though, that, Davies is part of this deep attacking group with so many players that can bring that kind of dynamism, but Stephanie Stacchio has such a defined role in this squad at the moment, and he's been so integral to a lot of the way they've played. I think maybe there's two ways to look at it. I think Stachio's position is maybe harder to replace in a sense,
Yeah.
but from maybe a mathematical perspective, Davies is the best player in CONCACAF, so that is, objectively a bigger loss to the squad. But I mean, obviously it's tough either way. You would love to have both of them.
Even either of them, I think would be a great
Either of them,
position to
yeah.
be in. So we already got a question from the chat, which I love. So continue to get those in. This one comes from Nicolas G, or Nicolas J, if it's French. I really don't know. I'm just reading text. But the question is, does the lineup versus the Americans change depending on the result at San Pedro Sula? Charlie, what do you think?
Depending on Canada's result at San Pedro Sula?
That's right, yeah. How they fare in the first match.
That's an interesting question. I don't think it'll change too much based on how Canada does. I think the US might change their approach based on how they do against El Salvador on Thursday, because if they struggle a little bit, I find it hard to imagine that they will struggle much in that game. But, if they do, if something strange does happen, then I can see Greg Berhalter maybe, feeling like he needs to rotate less. I don't know really how much you rotate for these 3 games. I think he's already said that because the Americans' travel schedule is a little lighter for this window, he thinks there are players that can play all 3 games, and I think we're still going to see a pretty strong lineup against Canada, but I don't think it'll change based on how Canada does on Thursday.
A little lighter seems generous.
We've seen that, right, already with precedent. I think what we know with John Herdman is that he's meticulous in his preparation, and he will have a lineup in mind for the United States already. And he's openly said, even when we're in Edmonton, that there's a couple of times where it's changed, right? And the Adekubi form in that round was when he basically said he's basically convinced me that he deserves to play in the next game. But rarely does those things change. The only other thing too is yellow cards, right? How does that impact that second game in terms of, I think Vittoria and Kay and Larea, players like that could impacted, but their availability could be impacted. There are others, Piet, I think there's 6 altogether that could be impacted by that game. So does that mean that he doesn't play a certain player in one of those games to be ready for the next? As usual, these are the things the international management has to be juggling in the air.
Yeah, I think a big question that I don't know the answer to, and I'm sure John Herdman is thinking about, is do you approach it as, for each game, you're maybe making 2 or 3 changes to keep everyone fresh? Or do you target the 2 away games against the easier opponents and make wholesale changes against the United States, right? That to me is kind of a key question for the whole window. I don't know if maybe Davies and Stacchio not being there could swing that one way or the other. I don't know how I'd approach that, because I do think that the 2 road games are both winnable, and if you can win them, that's massive, right? That puts you basically on the plane to Qatar. But the USA game has huge emotional value. The players will want to win that game desperately, obviously, against a big rival. The country is going to be watching that game probably more than the other 2, and you can't disregard that when you're in the position they're in as a program where they've got such a big opportunity to capture the attention of the nation here.
Well, for the sake of the argument, Ollie, and since you brought it up, if you had to choose, do you prioritize the American game or do you prioritize the 2 matches on the road?
I think in an ideal world, you prioritize the 2 matches on the roads, but you're still in a position where you can have at least certain players on the field against the States who can be difference makers. And I'm looking particularly at the attacking players. Maybe you can push them a bit harder than they have done in the previous 3 game windows. Because defensively, I do think they have a bit more ability to rotate. I think Daniel Henry will come in for that game. Vittoria doesn't usually go back to back. Kennedy and Cornelius are actually both playing football in Europe now, whereas Kamal Miller isn't. So that's an interesting one as well. So maybe there's a bit more ability to change in defensive midfields. But I think I would probably target the 2 road games.
Charlie, what about you?
I'm kind of torn on this one. I think that is probably the smarter way to go about it. If you take away kind of the external circumstances of having to go on the road to these Central American countries, those are the more winnable games. And obviously just points in the bank are, at the end of the day, the most important thing here. But I find it hard to believe that, John Herdman or anybody in that Canada squad would certainly never publicly admit, but even privately talk about, rotating for that game, because I think that's the one that they've got circled. It's the one that they are gonna, as Ollie said, have more of an emotional weight to. And I think the other thing that's important about it being the home game is Canada has that slight degree of control with things. Something that John Herdman talks about a lot is just how many things can go wrong, how these things logistically that the travel are out of your control when you go on the road, but when you're at home, you're forcing another team to come into your territory, right? To play on your turf. And I know that Canada obviously hasn't played on this turf literally, but it's still their home game, and it's the one where they can kind of control the situation a little bit better.
Yeah, I think it's more the away game, and I think because it's about putting your best foot forward right away. And it's not about holding anything back. It's the cliche in sports, but it is one game at a time. And what kind of message does it send to your squad more than anybody else, us fans, if you say, we're not going to play our best players in this Honduras game and we're going to save them for the US? That goes against everything that this squad has been on a mission from day one. It goes against everything. It's for me, if you have to play a different level of player against the US, you'll still back yourself to go out and do that. This is very similar to what they've done in the past. Liam Fraser and Sam Piette played in midfield against the US in the Gold Cup. And by the way, were excellent in that game. And so people would say, okay, you're rotating, but they were ready to play in that game and they were tremendous in that match. Daniil Henry spoke to me on Beyond the Pitch this week about that chance when he got to come back against the US in the Gold Cup in the semi-final. And then was happy to play in that game and was ready because he'd been put aside and he got that opportunity. He hadn't been playing. So I think what Herdman is, he's pretty singular at giving players missions and saying you will be playing in these games. But I think for me, that Honduras game, I know watching them, they're a good team. We shouldn't be looking at their record going no wins. They're cannon fodder. That's not the way that these games operate, particularly away from home in the World Cup qualifiers. But I still think they're a wounded team and they're vulnerable. And I think Canada will look at that and go, why would we hold anything back for that particular match?
Interesting. I think about Charlie's comment about having some home field control, and it makes me wonder if the showers at Tim Hortons Field have been corrected since the CPL final, but that's just speculation. Another question from the chat. This one comes from Stan K, who wants to know, do you think it could be a mistake not calling up more players for this window, considering COVID and potential injury concerns? Now, KJ, if I recall, I had them at 26 players for this window, but what do you make of Stan's question?
Well, what Stan probably doesn't know, and forgive me if he does, what people need to understand is that John Herdman doesn't want too many players in these squads. He's been adamant about that from day one. He doesn't want players not having responsibilities and roles. We get a little bit of a snippet sometimes when we've watched training, and he wants players active and involved. You can bring other players back in if and when it requires. But you'll remember Gutierrez is a good example. He's back in the squad now, but there was an opportunity. I think Ollie might remind me this. I think it was the Gold Cup where he was picked, but he wasn't named to go because they would rather have kept him with the club at that time, because it was about maximizing what was best for that individual at that moment. And he doesn't want people standing on the sidelines, playing linesmen while they can't play in a game of 11v11 in training. You've got to have players who are actively involved, because the other thing too, guys, is that the attitude of this group is there because everybody's playing a part. The moment you throw other people in and they're just kind of there, but they're not, and they're wondering if they get a chance, then the levels can start to come down. You don't want to be carrying passengers. You need active members of a squad. So that's why, for the most part, Herdman has very often picked less squads in terms of numbers than most people in this CONCACAF region around the qualification process.
Yeah, it's something that, sorry, I was just going to echo that. Like, it's something that maybe people don't see so much, that like when they're training 11v11, if you've got 26 guys, there's 5 guys standing around, right? And you don't want that. So I think having players on standby, ready to fly in if necessary is the way to go.
Charlie, anything to add?
Yeah, well, I think four guys standing on a side, but
Ollie's never been
No,
great
as
with
I said
maths.
it.
but no, it's the right point. And the other thing that we keep talking about with this Canadian national team is how tight knit a group they are, right? And whenever you talk to a player, they'll talk about this band of brothers thing. And just if you have too many guys kind of in there and on the peripheries of this group, then it kind of becomes bigger. It's easier to get lost in that group. And I think really the chemistry is not something that they want to mess with by just bringing so many people. And that's something that maybe you do after this World Cup qualifying cycle where you can experiment a little better.
Well, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine the three of you who are as glued into the sport as you are would have seen just the incredible feature that TSN put together and put out yesterday. And I'll totally give credit where credit is due. Julian de Guzman narrating his journey playing through Central America and reflecting on those times and really just nailing down how difficult it is to play in Central America. But then I found it curious when Gareth Wheeler was talking with John Herdman in an interview that's also available on our OneSoccer YouTube page, that Herdman said that Canada's actually looking forward to that hostility and those challenges. Charlie, how is it possible that with everything we've heard about Central America, and none of us will be able to appreciate as much as someone like Jules or Terry Dunfield, or anyone who's been there, but how do you get up and get excited for that hostility and the bags of urine and the chanting and the parties outside the hotel? What makes that click for some players and coaches?
Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is how many parts of this Canadian team, that for them, that it's the same sort of that it is for us. These are just stories, right? Because a lot of these players haven't had this experience yet, but this Canadian team seems to embrace these challenges. I mean, even before they walked into the Azteca, they would have said the same things. They were excited about that. They weren't, nervous that the occasion wasn't going to get the best of them. They were excited to go in there and, show this crowd and these other teams what they can do. And I think, part of what we've been talking about so much with this national team over this cycle is how much they want to change the narrative about Canada in everything. And I think obviously getting results or being able to play well in Central America, especially, obviously in San Pedro Sula, is a really, really big way to change the narrative. So I think they're definitely excited to, kind of keep checking boxes, so to speak, in, ways that Canada can prove that they're not a former version of the Canadian men's national team, right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'll just add this, guys. Like this, the collective belief is instilled amongst these players is just unwavering. They will not let things bother them. And of course, things could change and the things could go wrong. And they're 15 minutes down, and all the stories you hear, they're going to be difficult to deal with. But this is a different group, And I'm not saying that the hostilities down there are not real. I'm sure that they are, and I know that they are. And Julian's one of my favorite people to talk football with, and I'm so glad he was able to convey that message. But go to Istanbul. Talk about football atmosphere where Kyle Larin and Matibra play. Do you want to watch some Jonathan David games in Marseille that's been happening over the last couple of seasons? Tell me that's not hostile. Things getting thrown on the pitch and people having to move off. There's tons of that going on. These guys are experienced enough to understand that. They've been there and done that, Ollie. And look, I just don't think we'll be talking about if they do lose on Thursday night live on a OneSoccer postgame show, or suddenly they shrunk in the very difficult scenario of playing in San Pedro Sula.
I think that as well, they just take comfort in preparation, right? Like they're incredibly prepared for every single game they go into. And when you have that confidence in the work you've done leading up to it, it's almost like you don't really worry about the results so much. Like even if you lose the game, you kind of come out of it thinking like, well, we did everything we could, wasn't meant to be on the day. We were prepared for everything they threw at us, and so be it. You move on, right? And I think with this team, they are more prepared for every scenario, every kind of environment they're going to be in, that, more so than we've ever seen from a Canadian team. And that gives you a certain level of conviction. I think that the game is going to look like what you expect it to look like, and then it's up to you to play.
That'd be some kind of wild preparation, sending a text to your friends like, hey, it's going to be a strange favor, but there's something I need you to do for me before I go to Honduras. Back to the chat. This one's from Masood, and Masood asks, how big is it for Stefano Stacchio and the Canadian men's national team that he has made the move to FC Porto? Ollie?
Yeah, it's fantastic. As another player who's going to be playing, Champions League, Europa League, and in top European competitions in future years. And I think as many players as we can get to that level, playing against the best players in the world and in the most competitive environments is only going to be good for the national team. But like as KJ just alluded to, right? When you're playing like Atiba Hutchinson and Kyle Larin for a club like Besiktas, maybe things in CONCACAF don't seem quite so frightening. And the same goes for, Alfonso, obviously, and all of those players playing at a very high level. So I think Stefan has already established himself as one of, if not the best central midfielder in this region right now. So hopefully he can just continue on. I don't think it's a player that we need to see take a massive step forwards because he's already there playing at a very high level. But I think it can only do good things for you as a player to be playing against better players, on a more frequent basis.
Yeah, he's made for that club. No, I think it's perfect for the way that they play, and they and also, and don't take this the wrong way, because they are a club that is always in their pursuit of trophies, that singular focus, but they also don't invest in players for the long term and thinking we're going to stick around with you for a long time. They know that they can sell him again, and that's how good he can be. That's looking at selling £45 million players this transfer window to Spurs. So they can do that again, and this is a great place for him to go and shine. And this is why the curve for Canadian soccer is on the rise within this squad, because not only is it trending in the right direction for the international game, it works both ways with the club. And these players are not satisfied by standing still. Stacchio isn't satisfied staying there. Larrea isn't satisfied staying at TFC and goes to another level to play championship football with Nottingham Forest. And we go on and on and on throughout. That's why David will not be satisfied at Lille and will move. There's been so many others. Crepeau, not satisfied at playing with the Whitecaps and not winning playoff games, and goes to an outstanding organization in Major League Soccer with LAFC. There's so many of these examples out there that they are pushing themselves on a regular occasion to get there. And that's only going to make Canada better, Joel.
Yeah, it absolutely is. This is all you want. You want the ambition to move forward. And for Stacchio specifically, I mean, I think it's as you guys kind of said, it's a perfect move. It's a manageable step up. He's still going to be playing in a league he knows, but he's going to have that European football. He's going to learn a little bit more about winning and winning trophies, and because that's sometimes an element in football that players need to learn how to do, and it's manageable. And as KJ, you said, he will move on from there probably fairly quickly, but that's kind of the point. This is a really, really manageable and appropriate step up for a player who's been unbelievably good for his national team and his club in the last couple of years.
Charlie, you wrote an article today for CanPL.ca. Who will be the Canadian men's national team's new or next World Cup qualifying hero? I'm not going to ask you to give us the answer because you have to go read it on CanPL.ca. But on the topic of squad construction, who do you think, or what do you think is the most pressing question for John Herdman with his team in this window?
I think in terms of squad selection, it's got to be up in the attack, right? Because you've got so many players that you need to find a balance with. Obviously, there's 3 games, so they're probably all going to play at some point. I mean, specifically, I think you need to have a strategy for whether you platoon or play together with Kyle Larin and Jonathan David. I think that's maybe a tactical thing that we're still waiting to find the best version of with this Canada team, just to find out what the best way to play those 2 players in the same 11 is. And maybe you don't need to find a way for that. Maybe you're happy just to rotate them and have 2 completely different options. But I'm excited to see players like Junior Hoylett and Lucas Cavallini come back into the squad, because they've kind of the last couple windows fallen off the radar a little bit because of injuries and whatnot. So there's just so many options that I don't necessarily envy the task of having to find a way to balance these players and find out which games are best for each of them. I mean, I haven't even mentioned Tajon Buchanan yet, right?
That is our world now, isn't it? KJ, what do you think?
I mean, I think the biggest challenge that John has is what all international managers have, and I think it's that thing. And I wrote a little bit about this today in my piece. It's that thing that we're all used to analyzing in sports is momentum. Right? Momentum and form. But what is momentum and form in international football? What is it when you haven't seen these players for over 2 months? What is it that you're now picking them up again? And those process losses about what's happening in their personal life and how healthy they are and how far they have to travel and how are they playing right now? MLS players are not even playing. How competitive can they go? Can they go and give you 90 minutes and run like Osorio does every single match for every team he plays for? Are they athletically ready to go that? The camp gets cancelled. They're not quite doing what the US are doing, where they get their camps. So all these process losses are very difficult to manage for John Herdman. Now, what he does have is he's got a very mature together group that won't be affected by that. So he knows, having put all the body of work in already, Ollie, that he knows they're not going to go down and he's going to lose that. But I do think that is at the forefront of his mind, is that when he accepts them all into camp, what is he getting out of this group? And that's international management, really.
Yeah, for sure. And it's particularly central midfield for me. If we're looking at, where he's going to have, I think a bit of I don't know if dilemma is the right words, but how he kind of navigates that with, Atiba can't go 3 games. We know that at this stage of his career. Mark Anthony Kaye is in preseason, like all the MLS players. So again, what kind of condition is he going to be in? So there's going to be a role for Piet, who hasn't had a massive role so far. I think he is a player you can trust. He's a pretty safe pair of hands, but it's someone who hasn't really been a massive part of things to this point. And then beyond that, does Liam Fraser get a real opportunity? Osorio can play in that deeper midfield role, but I don't think it's natural to him. Or is there something else even more creative that he's going to come up with as a solution there? That's one, again, where I'm not sure what the answers are, and I'll be interested to see how he deals with that.
Just to pick up on something KJ mentioned, what I think is remarkable to me, and recency bias will obviously play a factor here, but thinking about the amount of moves some of these core men's national team players have made since the Azteca, with Loré going to Nottingham, as we've already mentioned, Stacchio in Porto, Buchanan now with Bruges and playing for Bruges, just the amount of traveling and experiences and new experience that they've had in such a short window is another fantastic reflection of how far this group has come in such a short time. It seems like this year has been fantastic for so many of them on so many reasons. I want to get back to the chat. This is Blood, Guts, and Thunder who asks, and makes me think that I miss Gareth Wheeler. I don't
need a bit of that.
And I won't repeat it too many times, but if Gareth Wheeler was here, or if he's watching, he's rolling his eyes. But the question is, with VAR being implemented in CONCACAF now, are you weary of how well it will be implemented? Yes, I'll bounce that to Ollie because he raised his eyebrows really high.
Yes, I am absolutely worried about how it will be implemented, but that's not because I think it's going to be badly implemented in CONCACAF necessarily. It's because it's been a bit hairy basically anywhere in the world it's been implemented to this point, right? Like there's been growing pains and hiccups everywhere. Some places like the Premier League much more than others, I'd say. And I think CONCACAF will go more down the MLS route where they use it as little as possible, which is good. So fingers crossed it doesn't play a big part, and hopefully plays a helpful part in, maybe fixing some actual clear and obvious errors. But I think Adam, that I'm not the biggest fan of VAR, and like I said,
I came to you first, brother.
It's like I said, it's caused some difficulties pretty much everywhere it's been introduced. So I think it would be naive not to expect a few controversies here and there.
KJ,
yeah,
anything?
Not much. I'll be honest. My family will be downstairs. They can advocate for this. You guys know I spent hours upon hours sitting in this room doing different positions of what I'm working on. I've got pages and pages of notes for these games this week. I haven't thought about this once. So I just hope we're not talking about it. You're only as competent as the people using the tools, right? So let's just hope the referees are good enough to be able to manage it. And let's just hope it's not even a talking point. That's I'll be honest. I think I was watching a Premier League game this past weekend, and the amount of discussion and the amount of talk on isolated incidents now in this game around officiating is, in my opinion, absolutely asinine, because nobody is learning from one position to the next. Oh, is it a foul? Is it not a foul? Well, no one's actually breaking down how close it was to the next one. You're not learning anything from this situation. All it is doing is just filling, content, and people are enjoying it. I get it, but it's just not for me. It's not the analysis that I'm interested in talking about when it comes to this game.
I think that's been another. Sorry to jump in again there. I don't want to go on about VAR forever, but I think that's been another kind of negative consequence of it, is it's changed people's expectations that they now want perfection in refereeing, and it's not going to happen, right? But because now we have the technology, everyone thinks, well, when something goes wrong, I've got a right to be, outraged like an infant, So it's not. I agree.
You're
with
going to
KJ.
say imbecile there for a second.
That would have been
Ollie versus
appropriate as well.
VAR is my absolute favorite. Okay, so we have KJ, who's apathetic in hopes that we don't have to talk about it. Ollie, who loathes it. Charlie, where are you on this VAR spectrum?
I mean, I share the skepticisms, and I'm not filled with confidence. I mean, I would say that in CONCACAF specifically, I mean, we've seen some of these games get really physical, and you wonder if just the fact that it's there maybe makes some of these teams have to maybe toe the line a little bit more, back off a little. I think there's probably some challenges in that Canada-Panama game that if there's VAR involved, maybe
Definitely,
at least one of them gets caught. But I'm still skeptical about it. I still have yet to be fully convinced by the system and see it implemented properly, but I do understand the thinking, and I think there is potential here for it to work out and, in a way work in Canada's favor. But again, you never know with these sorts of things, right? And the last thing we want to do, as KJ mentioned, is be watching a broadcast or at a game and have to talk about, offside lines and draw little shapes on the pitch and all that. Like that is just appalling. So hopefully it goes smoothly, and we're not talking about. We've already spoken about VAR for way too long, so I think we'll move on here.
Well, thank you, Blood Guts and Thunder, for derailing the show. It was going so well up until that discussion. Let me move to a simple one, Charlie. So there's not has to be a ton of thought here. Simple one is Canada wins in Honduras if blank.
Canada wins in Honduras if they just kind of stay out of trouble. Like if they stick to that game plan, they don't get sucked into any nonsense or anything, I think they'll be okay. Just I think defensively at the back, you just want to be on your game. You don't want to give away set pieces or kind of get caught flat-footed in transition or against the kind of direct play, because I think the goals will be there. I think they'll be able to get forward and get on the ball and attack. It's just you need to kind of keep your heads about you and make sure that there's no big errors or mistakes at the back, because those set pieces and those counterattacks are where Honduras can hurt you.
Ollie?
Yeah, I agree with that. Stay out of trouble is a good way to put it. If you look at the Panama game against Honduras, for example, and like Honduras, they lost the game in the end, but the 2 goals they took the lead with, Panama are in a really good attacking position and give the ball away. And then the second one comes from their attacking corner, right? So if you can avoid really silly errors like that create counterattacks, then I think I don't think Honduras are necessarily a team that's going to be super creative in breaking you down when you're in a good shape. So that's a good way to put it. And I'll also add Johnny David. I think this, his time has come, right? We're all expecting that kind of big breakout performance, and the way Alfonso has had a couple of them probably to this point in the qualifiers, and maybe that's a little bit unfair, but certainly with Davies not being there for these games, he's a player who gets a lot of the ball, a lot of touches. There's going to be a lot more for Jonathan David, I think, with him not there. And obviously we hope he performs and shows what a fantastic young player he is.
Yeah, I'll just add, just box clever, right? Box clever, be smart. That's for me. It's just be smart. And, don't go somewhere in the ring where you're going to be in trouble, right? Like that's the key, right? For me, and that's the way they played this entire campaign, which is what fulfills a lot of people with confidence about it. There's moments in games where they're not going to be at their best. There's moments in games where the other team is at the best and they are pushing you. And this Canada team hasn't melted yet. We have yet to see, and hopefully we don't see, we haven't seen where 15 minutes of a match where it's all gone off the rails, right? A bad decision and suddenly they've lost the discipline, or there's a red card here, or they let 2 or 3 goals in. It's not gone off the rails once yet. Even when the potential were there, the game at home, they came right back. They were behind against Honduras. They weren't bothered by it. Behind against the US, they weren't undeterred. Against Mexico, they took it to them. And even when they were behind, we've seen them a number of times when they go down or when things go against them. Panama at home. Okay, let's just go again, stick to the process and believe that we can play our best football here and go out and win the game or get something from it. And that's the mindset. That's mindset, guys. That's the way that they're set. Look, it's going to be unlike anything else. It's a difficult place to go. But I think if they stick to that mindset, they've got a great chance of coming out of there with something.
Those are 3 very great takes, and I almost feel bad for making this observation, but I've already given Ollie some flack for wearing a Club America sweater, and now he's drinking from a New England Patriots mug. Do you also like the Yankees?
Nah, I'm
Toronto
not.
Maple Leafs
I don't
are your
actually.
team.
I don't have an NFL team. I have a Patriots mug. I won't give you the story behind that, but I do not want to tie myself necessarily to
Nothing wrong with the
Belichick.
Patriots, mate. Don't listen to these people. Don't even bring it up. Charlie, you're a Bills fan. You got nothing to say, mate. You know, unless you want to talk about overtime rules, there's nothing you want to talk about.
All right, we're done here. Adam, what's the next question?
Luckily for you, Charlie, Reader P asks, does John Herdman go with a front three to get the most of Joe David? What else might help?
See, it's a difficult question to answer, I think, because it probably depends on the game, right? I think we've seen this team quite comfortably play with a front three, play with a sort of a front two with even wingers coming up to make it sort of a four, but a lot of that is kind of been contingent on having Alphonso Davies in the squad. So I think probably the easiest way to at least map it out on a lineup sheet is to have a front three with probably David in that middle spot there. But I mean, even still, the way that Canada lines up on a piece of paper is almost never the way that they look for more than 10 minutes of a match. So I think you know, the safe answer is probably it's a front three, I think, with this group. But honestly, I don't really know how to line it up, and I don't think it necessarily matters what exactly, you know, you do with the initial formation there. I don't know if you guys feel the same.
I would like to see Junior Hoylett play. I thought he was tremendous in the second half against Honduras, and he made a big difference at BMO Field. He's direct, and I think he can cause a lot of problems for them. Now, we have to remember, what did Canada do against Honduras before, and what can we take from that? Now, in the home game, they started with this hybrid, as they often do, back four with the three, and they asked Buchanan to almost be a fullback and Larea to play higher up and come into midfield on the left side. And then that was almost a back three, which they changed at halftime when they took Buchanan off at halftime and brought Hoylett on, and they played with a flat back four. So I think they learned a little bit from that. I think with the four, it certainly allowed them to be a bit more aggressive on the front foot. And again, I think they probably will play some version of a three. Now, in that home game, they started with Buchanan, David, Larin, and Davies. It didn't necessarily work at that point, but they did get the best out of it. But they're a flexible bunch, Ollie, and they know, the players have talked to us many times about this. They are ready at all times to make changes. And I think, you know, that we're never going to see a true version of Canada from whistle to whistle where they're going to remain in the same kind of shape.
Yeah, for sure. It's an interesting one because I'd like to see Junior Hoylett in there as well. But if you want to get David, Larin, and Buchanan in there, do you want another kind of more attack-minded wide player, or do you want someone who maybe adds a bit more security in midfield? Is the question, I think. I don't know, but they actually haven't gone back to Larin and David as a front two. I know, you know, it was kind of a front two, but not totally since that first game. Or only, you know, in the late stages, I think, of a couple of games, but never from the start. So that's one where we haven't really seen those two in combination a whole lot. I think it, you know, had its ups and downs in that Honduras game. I talked to Carl Aaron today, and he said he thought that, you know, for the first time, it was getting better as the game went on. And if they'd had a bit more time, they would have got a winning goal. And, you know, he likes, obviously, the potential of seeing himself play with Jonathan Davids. But that's still a bit of an unknown, I think, for this group, is how those two, because of some of the similarities they have, you know, can they play together in a front two and that be effective?
And I'll just add this. We all look back at Edmonton now in a positive light because of what happened, but it has to be said, when they made those calls to play David one game and Lara the next, they are big time decisions, massive decisions that, one, Herdman got right, but two, he had the players believing and taking it on that it was okay. It was okay because the culture of the group forces them to do that. Again, Daniil Henry told me recently when Ike Ubo came into his DMs and basically was asking about Canada, Daniil Henry vetted him. He basically vetted him. He's known this guy since he was a kid, but he's like, if you're going to come and play for us, you have to understand you're not going to play every single game and you're not going to start every game. Are you willing to take on that kind of, you know, it's not about you, it's we. It's not me, it's we. That's the mantra. That's the development of this squad, that they've policed themselves. And when Jonathan David, and I know people were absolutely amazed when he got dropped or rested for that game, when he has to accept that, get in line, everybody, right? Get it. If Jonathan David, you know, is going to not get picked in a massive game like that, and then they get it right, everything else is open, guys. So if we suddenly see one of them only playing against Honduras, then we shouldn't be surprised. We shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Well, from the bold move that Herdman made when he dropped Jonathan David, which is something KJ said. You can quote him. You can rewind. He said it. But someone who knows a thing or two about hot takes and bold takes is Alexi Lawless, which brings us to our next question from the chat. This is our buddy Matt B in YYC, who says, Alexi Lawless predicted that the Americans will take 9 full points from this window. What is a more realistic prediction for the Canadians, considering, and for the Americans, of course, they're hosting El Salvador and Columbus. They're here in Hamilton, and then they're hosting Honduras in St. Paul, Minnesota to wrap up their window. So what's more realistic for Canada if the Americans think they're taking 9, Ollie?
A points prediction for Canada? Look, I'm kind of split, right? Like it's a head and heart thing. Like I think in my head, I'm 4 or 5 points, I think is fine. That gets you in a good position going into the final window. But based on what we've seen from this group and, so far during these qualifiers, do I think they could get 6 or 7 and put themselves in a really wonderful position? Yeah, maybe. I think they can win 2 of these games. It's going to be really difficult. And I don't think it's a crisis by any means if they don't. But that's in the back of my mind as a possibility, right? But I think, winning 1 and making sure you don't lose 2 others is, you're in a decent spot going into those final 3 games if you can manage that.
Yeah, Ollie and I are usually on the same page. Same again. I mean, I thought about this already. If they won't accept this because they're not going to. But if you were to offer me 4 points and say, okay, let's go, I don't even need to play the games. Yeah. I'll take 4 points. 20 points going into the last window. Happy days, by the way. The other thing I'd say is that for me now, it is no longer at the point when we talk about this where we can only isolate Canada. It's about Panama, guys. Get out of this window, and I want them to get out of this window with another 2 points ahead of Panama. That's what it needs to be here. Because if they can get to 4 points ahead of Panama going into the next round, the goal has to be get beyond match day 13 and get them out. Because you don't want to get to play them in match day 14 with it still being on the line. When you get to this point, when you're leading after this amount of games, you do not want it to go down to match day 14 playing Panama to get to the World Cup, right? So how can you make sure you get that cushion? Beat Panama by 4 points before you play them. That's it. Now, Costa Rica have got a chance to get back in this, and they could be playing in the World Cup based on the draw of the continental playoff. But I don't think they're going to get enough points to beat Canada. But I do think that is an enormous game. That Panama-Costa Rica game is massive. I think it's an hour after Canada game on Thursday. That is massive. So keep an eye on that. And as I said, it's no longer just about what Canada can do. Watch Panama, keep an eye on Costa Rica, and the rest, it'll take care of itself, Charlie.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. I mean, you're right. It's about Panama, and that I think we will know a lot more about what the picture looks like after that Panama-Costa Rica game. But if you're Canada, you're thinking we can't control what happens in other countries at the moment. So I think back to what Ollie said, I think he nailed it. 4 or 5 points you absolutely take. I think that's really good. 6 or 7, that's unbelievably good window. And I think really thinking anything other than that, 9 points is out of the just a ridiculous thing to even think about, obviously, for the Americans as well. But
9 points, you're booking your plane, mate.
Yeah,
wow.
Some possibly
literally.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
On that note, I'll float it. They can qualify this window, I believe.
They can.
Yes.
If I've done the maths correctly, and I did subtract 22 from 26 incorrectly earlier on in this show, so it's possible I've got it wrong.
I've got it right. I've got it right here as well.
All right,
you probably got it.
Yeah.
You've got it.
I think it's if Canada gets maximum points and Panama gets 1 or fewer, or Mexico, they qualify. And there's something to do with Jamaica and Costa Rica not getting like 9 points each.
I've got Canada win all 3. Mexico or Panama lose all 3. Costa Rica gets 6 points. Costa Rica gets 6 points or fewer in this window.
Yeah.
Jamaica do not win all 3 games.
I think that sounds about the same as me. I think they can do it if Panama get 1, don't they? Or Mexico? Maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe, yeah. I think you're probably right. Yeah. So
that's where we are, ladies and gentlemen, with Canada atop the standings, and that's going to tie us into our next question. But since we're on it, let's go over the table. So Canada, of course, leads on 16. The Americans and Mexicans are at 15 and 14, respectively. Panama also level with Mexico on 14. Then there's a bit of a gap. Costa Rica on 9, Jamaica on 7, El Salvador 6, and Honduras on 3. So I'll ask that based on the standings, Charlie, which side needs a result the most or results the most in this window?
I think the obvious answer is Costa Rica, right? I mean, they're the team that has the best chance at taking Panama for that 4th spot, and they play them at home in that first game of the window. That's a massive, massive game for this Costa Rican side, who are talented and have a pretty good history of getting to World Cups and doing quite well there. So they'll certainly be feeling some pressure in that game specifically and for this window. But I mean, maybe an honorable mention to Jamaica, who I think a lot was expected of in this World Cup qualifying cycle, but we maybe haven't seen the best of them yet either. But Costa Rica is the obvious answer, right?
Some OneSoccer pundits think they're still in it, and they're not Kristian Jack or Oliver Platt. Just saying. Sorry, KJ. Please continue.
Wheels up.
Loves Jamaica.
I think it's Costa Rica, but I'll also add Panama because they have to go to Mexico and the US as well yet. Like everyone sees that they've definitely overperformed. I put a table out on Twitter yesterday. They've led more minutes than anybody in this World Cup qualifier. And, they have definitely, exceeded expectations of many. They have been a surprise here, but it has to be said that the schedule is not favorable for them. I'm not going to predict it, but I would expect them to not get any points out of Mexico away and the US away. They're not that good to go to go those places and get that. So for me, you look at 4 games to how to maximize their points tally above 14. And that's Costa Rica away, another difficult game on Thursday night. And then all of a sudden you're looking at Jamaica at home next, which is, they're still in this. Honduras at home, and then guess what? Canada at home, match day 14, where we're all hoping doesn't mean anything. So, they're running out of games too, right, Ollie? So it's pretty big and important time for Panama here as well.
Yeah, and even you can say the same about Costa Rica. I agree with you. That Costa Rica-Panama game is massive. But even if Costa Rica wins that, like, they've already played Jamaica, Honduras, and El Salvador at home. So they've still got a really difficult pathway forwards, even if they can, kind of claw their way back in with a win against Panama on Thursday. So we're in a good spot, right? It's just a case of if Panama have exceeded expectations so far, and can they keep doing it right through the rest of the way?
Well, Canadian soccer supporters are hoping to see Canada test themselves against the best in the world. Should they qualify? And as KJ and Ollie have pointed out and made me sort of go dizzy for a second, the maths to how to get there. But obviously the hope is that they do get there. And by doing so, they'll be playing in the World Cup. And we would expect to see some friendlies against nations that aren't in CONCACAF for the first time in what feels like an eternity and pre-pandemic at that. So this one's a little bit of a fun one. I want you guys to pick a nation to compare Canada to from Europe right now. It could be quality, it could be playing style, it could be tactics. John Herdman reminds you of someone, but a European equivalent for Canada right now. Ollie, you were there most recently. I will start with you.
Well, I'll admit before I start this, I don't watch a lot of European international football outside of the tournaments, to be honest with you. Even England's nowadays, I kind of wait till they've qualified. But one I've picked out is Serbia.
Yeah,
they're a team that has underachieved quite a lot over the years. Maybe not to quite the same extent that Canada has, but now they're doing very well. They've obviously won their European qualification group over a team like Portugal, and they've got a very exciting attack, much like Canada has with Vlahovic and Jovic and even Mitrovic as well. So they stood out to me as one that you could maybe draw a few comparisons with.
Charlie?
Yeah, Serbia is a good one that I think makes a lot of sense. I've gone a little bit more ambitious with my pick. I think Denmark has some kind of similarities. I mean, obviously, they've got quite a good history, but they're not a major power in their region. They've got this kind of young, exciting generation coming up alongside some experienced players, Mikkel Damsgaard and Kasper Dolberg and Joachim Mela. And they were a lot of fun to watch at the Euros over the summer with, their strong play in the wide areas and the way that they even adapted to challenging situations after obviously the very, very horrifying situation in the first game with their captain. And, just the way that we saw them in the Euros come out and play against, maybe teams that would be favored or more established nations and play kind of without fear. Something that reminds me of Canada. The way they walked into Wembley and played against England in that game in the semi-final, for instance, took them to extra time and had parts of that game on the front foot, is something that reminds me of Canada at the Azteca. So I don't. Plus, they're red and white. I mean, there's a visual comparison.
I respect the simplicity of it all. KJ?
Yeah, I saw this question briefly before we came on, and I like Ollie again. We're on the same page. I did think right away of Serbia because of obvious comparisons. Tons of guys in the 20s, like Canada, all peaking, underperformed over the last few years, are shocking the nations around them, beat Portugal, top of the table, like Canada, beating bigger nations. You think about Milinkovic and Milinkovic-Savic and obviously Vlahovic is, comparisons with David now as being that transfer, and obviously got his Juventus move now, and Tadic is like that older statesman captain like Atiba Hutchinson is for Canada. So there's tons of that. The one thing I would say is what this question did for me when I just heard it is when I watch European international football, and I know there's a lot on the line, but unless you're playing a minnow, there's not a lot of real explosive attacking football. And I think that's the case in international football anyway, right? Because it's far behind the superior game of club game where the best managers are, tactics are worked on daily, and the best players are playing with each other. But I will say that it reminds me a little bit of just what we've got special about this Canadian team right now, that they are a special team that get you out your seat quickly with pace and with real attacking drive and something you just don't see a lot in the international game. So it did remind me that just away from this CONCACAF region that we're analyzing, that around the globe, there's not a lot of teams right now. I'm not saying that Canada are going to go out there and beat all these teams, but offering that entertainment value, which I think is a really important part of where Canada is in 2022 as they start to connect more and more with fans in this country who've loved this game for a long time.
I know OneSoccer videographer and editor Nora Stankovic is absolutely thrilled with how that question went for Serbia. A quick one, and it's just got to be a or B, Ollie and KJ. We've teased Andy about this a few times. In a Worlds where Canada and England are playing in a knockout match, who are you cheering for and why?
That wasn't on the rundown.
I know. I'm full of surprises, aren't I? There's just so many up in my sleeve here.
Well, I'm probably going to sit on the fence here because we'll probably be broadcasting it. And when I broadcast, not cheer for anybody. So I'm going to. It does remind me of a certain pre-editorial dinner we had in Vancouver in the 2015 Women's World Cup when Canada played England, and we did it at TSN. And certain Luke Wildman and I had a lot of these questions thrown our way from a very strong Canadian contingent working with us at that time, and England's national anthem playing and all of that. So that does remind me of that. But I ain't going to say nothing else because I'm going to get myself in trouble, Ollie.
Seasoned pro. Ollie, not so seasoned, but a pro.
Oh, he's seasoned enough.
He's a fence sitter, so I imagine he'll sit it, but I won't put words in his mouth.
You want me to answer as well?
Wheeler's just screaming at the TV right now. Make a statement.
It's Canada.
Well, Wheels has got nothing to say on the subject, seeing as he very quickly swapped Wales for England during the Euros. As soon as Wales were knocked out,
wearing an England kit like the day after Wales was ousted. But that's a sidecar for another day. Did you want to answer, Ollie? You don't have to. If you
I
don't
think
want to.
if Canada played England, I think I would support Canada at this point. Like, this is home for me now, so I think I would lean that way. And for Canada, it's newer, right? To be playing in a World Cup game against a team like England is probably a bit more special. So don't get me wrong. Like, I've been watching England my whole life. Obviously, it would mean a lot to me if they won a tournament or something like that. The last couple of tournaments have been amazing to watch as an England fan. But I think I would go Canada. Yeah.
Can we just pray that happens? Can you imagine how big that will be for this national team on April the 1st if Canada gets England in a World Cup qualifier? Like, can you imagine how massive that will be? Like, Charlie will be on BBC and everything.
That's so good. I don't know how I'm going to collect myself after that one, KJ. I was not prepared for that. So let's go to a YouTube question. This is going to come from MKH, who asks, what city should Canada play their final World Cup qualifier versus Jamaica in, and why? Charlie, Mr. Future BBC correspondent.
The BBC. Okay. This is always a polarizing question, right? I don't. Nobody has any strong opinions on this, right? Nobody has any strong opinions
right now, Charlie.
I can't actually remember what the order of the games are. They play at home on the second game of that window.
I believe so,
believe.
yeah.
Yes,
I think they're on the road to wrap.
Yeah. Costa Rica away, Jamaica
Costa
at home,
Rica.
Panama away.
Yeah. So, yeah, people might not like this, but I think it's probably got to be Toronto, right? I mean, just because
don't ask us to bail you out.
Again,
Explain your reasoning.
it's the travel situation. You know, Canada said so many times that is a huge factor in these windows, especially with playing on the road and then having to come back so quickly. Yeah, I mean, BMO Field's got the grass, which should be ready to go by that point. I think the MLS season will be underway by then, so that should be fine. But I mean,
yeah, that's the answer.
I think it's
tag me in. I'll come help you out in the ring.
Yeah, go right ahead.
It's the answer. Stop it, everybody. I understand that we want to take the team. I understand that you want to see them in your country or in your city across the country. But where is the best place for them to succeed? Go to a place where they're already familiar, playing on a surface that is the best surface they can play on, that they can play actually in a stadium that has already been played in already, outdoors. With, I get it. It sucks for some people. And by the way, while we're on it, it also sucks that some people didn't get tickets today when they thought they already had them. It's a tough world out there right now. I feel for everybody, but there is only one answer. It's the right answer, and it's Toronto because of the atmosphere that was there already. They played there already. It's easy for travel, and as I said, the surface, it's got to be what's the best situation for them to play in. So, or unless they take us all out to Edmonton again, but I just can't see that.
Yellowknife is punching the air right now, KJ. This was supposed to be our time. Ollie?
No, it's the same answer. You do what's best for the team in that particular and now just one game, right? And what is going to be best for the team for all the reasons the other two guys have mentioned is Toronto. Like, I'm sorry, I know people maybe won't like to hear that, but it will be. Vancouver, I'm sure, would have been absolutely fantastic for a World Cup qualifier, and knowing that stadium, the atmosphere would have been brilliant, but there are just things that have played in Toronto's favor. It's established at this point as essentially the home base, and you don't mess around or take any risks in your last home World Cup qualifier.
If I can just jump in there, that's exactly right. I mean, you don't take risks with that game specifically. I think Canada will play games in other cities, right? I think they will come back to Vancouver eventually, just not in a game where so much is on the line and you need every competitive advantage you can get. I think obviously there's games coming after this World Cup qualifying, right? There'll be friendlies to tune up for, hopefully knocking on wood, a World Cup. I think there's a Nations League coming up fairly soon. Like this team will get to other places in the country, but this is just maybe isn't the right time for it.
Maybe they can play in Vancouver if they qualify for the World Cup this week.
There you go. Yeah.
Exactly. I was going to say as well, hopefully there'll be a lot of friendlies if we do qualify before the World Cup, right? So take the team around the country then for sure.
Absolutely. Well, we're nearing the top of the clock, so I want to get to one more question, specifically, KJ, because you had the chance to speak with Lucas today on an interview that's readily available on YouTube right now through this CanPL about his decision to sign with TFC and what a massive step forward that is for him in his domestic and club career. But he's never been shy about saying, KJ, that he wants to make the jump and represent Canada. Now, we know center back is a position for the Canadians that could always use a little bit more depth. But when you hear a young player like that, who's obviously riding the highs and the emotions of such a massive move for himself, but to have the confidence and say, yeah, this is great, but I have my eyes set on something higher. What did you make of that from Lucas?
Yeah, Adam, it's a great point you make there because this is obviously a successful story for all of Canadian soccer. The pathway, Canadian Premier League, developing the player, getting to do that. Toronto FC, every credit for looking at that opportunity to go and get that player, similar to the way that Montreal did with Joel Waterman. But then again, this is what happens around the world, right? What's the next step? International football. And he sees that as a potential. And why shouldn't he? Waterman has already had those opportunities with camp. Bustos was in camp in January of last year when he was still a CPL player. We know Pantomas has got chances because he played there as well. And I think, Ollie, the development, when you think quickly of how fast the development of some of these Canadian men's national team players have come, when you think how quickly Johnston's come and where he's come from in the last 2 years, and a Kamal Miller, players like that, you think with McNaughton, if he can be given chances to play and put in the right environment and coached to get better, the centre backs tend to peak as they go older anyway. You wouldn't rule that out as a player that is going to get those opportunities. And as he said to me today, wants to play in a World Cup sometime. And that's just a great opportunity to see a player that doesn't rest on his laurels when he gets that big move and still wants to aim higher.
Yeah, definitely wouldn't rule it out. And it's a reminder that for some players, and I think particularly defenders, like you're not going to find out necessarily what the full potential of that player is at age 20, 21. Sometimes it takes a bit longer. And as we've said many, many times, that's why, the Canadian Premier League and having these opportunities for players to actually continue their careers into their 20s rather than get judged as, as teenagers or 20, 21-year-olds. That's why it's so important. So really, really happy for Lucas. I think he could absolutely be in the national team picture in the future. I think Joe Waterman is going to be creeping up there this year as well with the way he finished last year with Montreal. So it's good times. I have to clear the floor for the former voice of the Ryerson Rams, who's called Lucas on more occasions than he's cared to mention to us over the past couple of years, and get his take on this rapid rise.
Yeah, come on, Adam. We want to hear what you have to say.
Look, my role is not to be the analyst. They put me in the host chair for a reason. But every now and then I shine, I dazzle. And it was like my third week at the office, and I'm walking around. I'm shy. I show up to my first day to do a remote broadcast wearing a full suit and Petrillos and a hoodie and sweatpants. She's making fun of me. And I sprinkle a little bit of knowledge. I say, guys, watch this Lucas McNaughton guy. I know him from covering him from the Ryerson Rams. Only Lucas McNaughton. Don't worry about the rest of Pacific. And to be fair, a lot of that team didn't quite carry on. I'm just saying. But I am extremely happy for Lucas McNaughton. Ollie, thank you for the praise I so truly, truly deserve. But yes, all the best. I think he's sensational. He's got the size for it. I saw someone mention on Discord that they didn't know he was a model, which I think is hilarious that people are discovering that now, but I digress. But no, I'm super happy for the guy. He is a man mountain, and all the best to him. Charlie, I'll give you the last word on that, but there's also a question for you from the YouTube chat that I want to get in. It's the final question. And I know I'm going to ask you this because I've recently played FIFA around you, and I know that you're insane at it in a good way. This comes from Coot2, who asks, Ungaro Easton, of course, was added to FIFA 22. He is a 61 overall. Are the 60s the right range for CPL players? What would you give Lucas McNaughton?
That is such a difficult question. I think 61's a little. I'd have to see the individual stats. I'd have to see what his heading stats are, because they'd have to be pretty good there. But I think yeah, it's probably a reasonable range. I mean, hopefully we'll find out what the range is in the actual game fairly soon. McNaughton, I think maybe you give it 62. 62, 63.
Lucas McNaughton better than the CPL's all-time leading goal scorer. You heard it here from Charlie O'Connor Clark first. Gentlemen, that was an hour. It flew by. I want to thank you all so much for carving out so much time. Oliver, I want to congratulate you on your wireless headphones lasting the entire show
today. Fully charged.
Proud of you, buddy, for charging them ahead of time. Make sure you guys check out all of KJ and Charlie's recent content on campbell.ca, the YouTube channel. Some great stories and insight. And of course, there'll be even more analysis coming your way there in the lead up and throughout this window. And OneSoccer has a surprise or two in store for you as well, including more analysis on everything to do with Canada soccer tomorrow on OneSoccer today. So for Kristian, for Charlie, for Ollie, for Marty and Armin behind the scenes, thank you to you two as well. And of course, the chat, to everyone for participating and watching. This is what we do it for. We do it for you guys. So we hope you enjoyed it. And we'll be talking to you very, very soon. Congratulations to everyone on a successful OneSoccer Roundtable. Good night.
Your Canadian men's national team is about to put on a show.